Welcome to the latest episode of the National Leadiology Association. Today, we have a special guest on our podcast. Our episode today is on the power of celebrating small wins and failures in leadership. It's going to be a fun one. As usual, I am your host, Dr. Amin Sanaia. I am joined by my tag team partner, TT.
Hey everyone, my name's Tanner Thorp, and honestly, I'm tired of titles. So I'm just a lover of people. I'm a child of God, and I'm just trying to be my most authentic self.
All of those are titles. I love it.
There you go. And our special guest, Mr. Tadd Weese, is with us. Tad, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
So my name is Tadd Weese. I live in beautiful Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I can get almost anywhere in 20 minutes, even in traffic. And we're known for architecture and food and music. So if you haven't been here, come see us. I've been in the operational side of business for the last 25 years and the last almost 18 in senior living. So, and that's where I came to know Dr. Amin and Tanner.
Welcome, welcome. So, I let Tab pick this topic because this is his time here with us. But why is this topic important? Why does it matter? Tanner, let's hear your thoughts.
So you and I have talked about this quite a bit in past episodes, and mountaintops are great,
Yes.
but the valleys are where we find ourselves.
Yep.
The valleys are where the lessons happen. The mountain climb is where the lessons happen. And if you can't find the wins along the way in the difficult moments, you're never really going to appreciate what it is in the big moments.
Mm-hmm.
And the mountaintops are meant to look at the view, to be thankful for the fact that you're there, and then to find the next mountain to climb. So, I think we in leadership oftentimes we we forget to celebrate small wins, and we forget to accept that in every lesson there's a blessing, and trying to figure out how to find the the wins in the small defeats really tr shows what kind of a leader that you are. That's the difference between a leader and a manager,
Yeah.
right? I
Mhm.
mean, manager manages processes, manager manages systems, manager manages people. They don't lead them. A leader inspires. And how do you inspire? Well, you have to see the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything you want to share on that, Tad?
I mean, he hit a whole bunch of really good points. I read a book a number of years ago, and I was struggling to remember what it was, but there's a theory inside of it about if you're going from this side to this side and there's a valley between it, the only way to get through there is to go through the valley. And sometimes in the bottom of that valley, you just have to sit until you figure your way back up to the other side. So it's called sitting in the U and celebrating those victories on this side, sitting in the U over here, contemplating your plan to get to the other side before you celebrate that one. And then from a leadership standpoint, it's important for me personally to celebrate the wins, especially with my team, because it's really important for them to know that they're making progress, that they're doing good work, that their work is being recognized, but also celebrating the failures, and not simply because they're failures, because they're opportunities to learn.
Yep.
And the opportunities to learn and a failure to me are just enormous if you are self-reflective enough and self-actualized enough to learn those lessons.
Yeah, and we'll get to the failures in a bit. What is there something you wanted to say, Tanner? Because I was gonna talk a little bit. So one of the things in my early days as a professional, when uh, I remember the first leadership position I had in the healthcare facility, and I took over a facility that was there were so many issues. There were so many regulatory issues, and it was to the point. I mean, their annual survey had close to 60 citations, and it was insurmountable. Like you don't have enough time to get through everything before they come back for resurvey.
Yeah.
So the idea was like you take it by chunks. So you take the your most important pieces that you are um, out of compliance with, and work through that process, get those back in line. They'll come back for a resurvey, and you still have a bunch left. But in the entire process, if you work along with the regulators, they'll show you, they'll work with you if you're able to show that you're going to make the progress to get to it. What I learned through that process was very similar to the topic that we're discussing today. So when Tad sent me a few topics, I saw that one. I was like, oh, we got to talk about this. Because what I learned is that while we had these unsurmountable things that we had to do, um, I didn't realize that by taking every time we took care of one citation, and we're like good, we're solid with this, and we're doing everything we're supposed to do on a daily, weekly basis for it, and celebrating it, then that created momentum to do the next one, versus just looking at the whole mountain. Oh my God, how are we going to do this? And so like the old saying, right, that we all hear, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Yeah, but until you're actually doing it, when you're
Yeah.
actually in the situation when you actually have to do it,
And
like
you're hoping that elephant doesn't realize it, turn around and stomp you into the ground.
yeah, yeah, it's like Tanner said. I mean, the good part is in the process as you're going through it, as you're doing it. So once we're going through that process, that's where I realized, well, hold on a second, I'm gonna burn everybody, myself and everyone else out if I'm just focused on let's just do it, let's just do it, let's just do it. But we're not taking the time to celebrate, hey, yeah, this is a huge deal, but look what we accomplished today.
Yeah.
Look what we did, in a week. Look what we did in a month.
Yeah.
And it after it took doing 3 or 4 of the big citations, when I realized like, no, we need to slow down. How about we just take a time to reflect and celebrate a little bit.
Yeah.
And then then that created the momentum to be able to get through them. It took us 9 months, and getting ready to get decertified before we actually got through all of that. But it's some serious stuff when you're going through a process like that.
Without question. Yeah. And it's easy to find yourself in a hole and really difficult to get back out. Kind of reminds me of the old story, the farmer that found his donkey in a hole. And he's just whining and carrying on, whining and carrying on. They thought, well, I can't get him out, so I'm just going to bury him. Well, he kept piling dirt in on top of him. The donkey would shake it off, step up on it. Next thing you know, he climbed all the way out on that thing, kicked the farmer. But it's a matter of there's a problem in front of you and what seems like a bigger problem raining down on you. But if you have a moment to shake it off and realize, hang on, now I'm getting a little closer to my goal. And then next thing you know, you're out of that pit.
Yeah. Well, and historical reflection is important too. I mean, after those 9 months, your team was incredibly well prepared for the
Oh,
next annual survey that was coming up. And
Absolutely.
it's a lot of what we talk about on these podcasts, and as we dig into leadership, they're lessons that can be used in your personal life too.
Hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, I've been on a very deep personal journey over the course of 7 years, but it's been very intensified over the course of the past year and a half, and specifically over these past 6 months. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a period of deep anger. And it's an unfamiliar feeling for me because I regulate my emotions pretty well. I've done a lot of deep work on digging in and understanding. But in this moment, it was, the dark rain clouds over Tanner's head, and the self-pity, and the anger, and the and then the introspection.
Yes.
and trying to figure out what's going on and dig deeper in it. And one of the things that God put very, very, very heavily on my heart was, Tanner, don't forget to look back and reflect on all of the other times that you've made it through situations that seemed insurmountable, that seemed unbearable, that seemed overwhelming. Historical reflection is incredible. And as you build your teams and as you build your experience as a leader, you can always find those examples of where it seemed like everything was going against you, but somehow you made it through. And if you haven't had those challenges yet in your leadership journey, I promise you, you will.
Oh
I
yeah.
promise you, you will. If your leadership journey has just been excellent the entire way, all the every piece is fallen into place for you. You know what? Just go ahead and turn off this podcast now. You don't need any of the lessons that we're teaching you. you know, but I promise you will have valleys, you will have mountaintops, and being able to reflect is super important.
So at the end of that process, Dr. Mean, how did your team feel? I mean, did they feel like it was accomplished? Were they burned out? How did it end up?
Um, we lost people along the process because not everyone is built for something like that. It's very
Yeah.
intense. But no, they felt great. And the one thing that I remember from that, and I can speak to several of the people on that team, is that we created lifelong friendships. I mean, we have lifelong relationships because of undergoing something that was if you look back at it, you're like, wow, how did you guys get through that? No, because we understood the responsibility, but also understood that it was a process. It was not something that, oh, we're gonna reach this goal and then that's it. No, it was changing the way we operated, the way our perspective on how things should be,
Mhm.
not taking things for granted.
Did you get the sense along the way that those that stayed were staying because they felt an obligation to their coworker and to you, as opposed to, yeah, I liken it to, the buddy syndrome in the military. A lot of people would quit, but they've got the guy next to them that they're responsible for, and so on and so forth. I found in personal experiences that are similar that when you're going through that, let's call it a crucible, that those people that are going through it with you tend to stick it out because they feel an obligation and responsibility for the person next to them, the one who's helping with the process. Did you get a sense of that as well?
Absolutely, 100%. It was sense of belonging of no, we're going to do this together and we're going to get through this together. And to your point, and I think you were getting to this, it wasn't about, we're doing this for the organization. No, we're doing this for my people, the
Right.
the, the people that we're with.
And then there was a sense of pride afterward.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
I mean, still, I mean, for me, it was 30 years ago, still,
Yeah.
big, big proud moment, because I mean, you talk about learning through the fire, and that was my first executive leadership position, leading a healthcare facility. I have so many stories from that. um, from there, a lot of my leadership that I lean on is, I look back at those examples like, oh my God, yeah, have you experienced this? Absolutely. Let me go back to here.
Yeah.
Go back in time and replay that tape. Oh yeah, this is what happens.
So let me ask you both a question then. Is there a time when you're quiet and you're being retrospective, you look back on your leadership experience and you think, wow, I just didn't celebrate that win enough for myself or for my team?
Oh, 100%. For me, I can tell you, I don't celebrate myself enough. That is something that I am working on now. Before I didn't. I need to do more of that.
Yeah.
For my team, yes and no.
Yeah. How about you, Tanner? You're
Yeah,
such
so
a jovial guy. You're pushing everybody. No, no, this was them. That was their win.
Yeah, that's my detriment. I read something the other day that hit me really hard. And it was just a little saying. It said, if you don't self-promote, no one else is going to promote you.
Oh
Right.
man,
And
we're learning that right
and
now.
Oh my
yeah,
God,
and
yeah.
in my life, I have always, well, okay, so coming from a culinary background and a chef background, it's a very arrogant, egocentric industry, right? I mean, every chef that has the aspiration and the ambition to truly be a master of their craft or to try to be a master of their craft, that they are dedicated in a sole purpose of being the best.
Mhm.
And in that field, you're talking about trying to crush every other competitor that's out there. I mean, it is incredibly competitive. And so it builds an arrogance that in the kitchens that I came up in, you had a lot of the Gordon Ramsays, right? And by nature, that was the way you got people to do things. And my delegation system became very authoritative. My disciplinary action systems became very personalized. And it was a very unhealthy mindset that took me years to really break. It was working with a really great mentor, and seeing her kindness and the way that she approached the same situations that I would have approached with a totalitarianism and anger. She approached with grace and understanding, and it changed how I perceived things. I've always been I've always been a very gregarious person. I have no problem walking into the room and shaking everyone's hand, introducing myself. But I have always had a problem with the self-promotion piece because it didn't feel authentic to my nature to sit there and talk about myself when I knew I wasn't the only one doing the work. And so I changed course a bit, and I really started to celebrate my team. And to your point, Tad, very much it was, this wasn't my doing, it was my team's doing. That's an unhealthy mindset too. So I swung from one paradigm to the other paradigm, and it's been over the past couple of years that I've gotten back into kind of centering that, and recognizing that, yes, my team does the work, but without my leadership, they're not going in the direction that they got to.
Yeah. So that
And
overcorrection that you had. Yeah.
exactly. And I still struggle with the self-promotion piece. And that comes back to what we were talking about before we started the podcast of breaking down your personality and breaking down your ego and things like that. So, I'm getting better at promoting myself. I love Simon Sinek. I think he's one of the greatest, and I love his optimism. I love Start with Why, but I think the idea of leaders eat last is that's not fair either,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Because it puts the leader on a pedestal that really while they need the separation from the team, they also need to be a part of the team.
Yeah.
And so I think the idea in theory is great in that everybody else first, I'll eat last, but the better idea is we all eat together.
That's right.
If I eat, you eat.
Well, and I think that there's a time and a place for each one of those theories.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of, sorry, my grandfather clock's going off here. The there may be a time where I eat last because for whatever reason. But yes, to your point, the way you grow your team is you get to know them. You create that space for collaboration. You do that through food. And you've said this multiple times. The common language for almost everybody in the world is food. And if you have that opportunity to share that experience with somebody else, that positive experience is as powerful or can be as powerful as that tough experience that Dr. Amin was talking about just a moment ago. So, and you said something a second ago that made me think of another question.
Mhm.
You had a mentor that helped you realize and then help you reshift your focus and do that fundamental mind shift. In my life, I've definitely had those, and I would say that you two definitely count among them. But do you have one in particular that stands out in your experience that helped you realize the importance of celebrating the wins as opposed to focusing on the negative, which is just so natural to do for people? And if you don't, that's
So
fine. It could be a conglomerate.
no, I have had numerous. I don't know if I would say he's a mentor, but a dear friend, and we've worked together collaboratively in the past. And he is probably one of the greatest self-promoters I've ever seen in my life. He's probably one of the greatest delegators I've ever seen in my life. And the way he delegates and gets people to do things for him is he shows who he is and how loyalty and honor create a special energy and bond between people. And his name's Anthony Camerano. He's one of the most gregarious, outgoing people you've ever met in your entire life. But he is probably one of the best self-promoters I've ever seen. You know who Anthony is before you ever meet him. And you know, before I ever met him, he was known as the guy who has a guy. And
Okay.
so in the culinary industry, he was the guy in South Florida that if you wanted 3,000 lobsters today, he's got a guy. If you want an ice carving of Venus de Milo, you know, in the clamshell or whoever that was, Venus in the clamshell,
Yeah.
he's got a guy. Right? You want that today, he's got a guy, right? You need special permits for your workers today. He's probably got a guy. I mean, like that's how he was known before before you ever met him. Oh, you want to meet Anthony? He's the guy who knows everyone,
Yeah.
right? You only get that reputation by self-promotion and by delivering on what you say you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, in speaking of self-promotion, and I'm thinking about the question you asked, Tad. I've had, I mean, throughout my journey, one of the things that I learned very early in my career because of failures, and we'll get to failures in a minute, was that the power of having mentors. You have to have mentors. You know, your inner circle and the people that surround you, they have to bring something to the table that you otherwise don't have, a skill set that really complements who you are and allows you to grow as a person. So our audience, as you listen, if you don't have that, you probably want to look at, you know, the five or six people that's around, you know, that are in your inner circle. They have to be people that are they're bringing something to the table for you, and you are helping them, you know, supporting them in some way, shape, or form. If you don't have that, you're not good. Um, but it is so important, man, to really be able to do that. I know you and I were having a conversation the other day about this self-promotion. I mean, well, that's something that's strange to us that we have to do now, and so we get to learn through it. And it's finding, I guess, for me, the thing is finding that delicate balance of when it's too much, you know, when it's not enough. So that's what came to mind for me.
And then you were started on another topic there before you answered my question. Do you remember what it was? I didn't.
About mentors and
Uh, so do you have one in specific
no,
that
I don't have one in specific. I have, you know, several of the mentors I have, there were there while they did some self-promotion, it wasn't outright something that you know hit you upside the head like Tanner's friend there, Anthony.
Yeah. So something you said a second ago, and I wish I remember who's responsible for this quote, but it's show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yep.
And if you are surrounded by people that are not better than you, that are not helping you grow, then you will not grow. If you're surrounded by people that are better than you, that are helping you grow, then that is going to be your future. And to Dr. Amin's point, if you don't have people like that, or if you're the uplifting person in your group, you need to find an additional group that's going to help you lift up as well, because it's a whole lot easier to pull somebody down than it is to lift somebody up. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
get yourself.
Absolutely. You need to find those people in your life that are going to do that. You know, we're part of this program with executives that are all looking at different roles and stuff like that. And yesterday I had a conversation with one of them, I mean, it was such a fulfilling conversation. He's like, man, you know, I need someone like you in my life, in my inner circle. So I was like, wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just I just wanted to touch on it's also important to recognize where you want to go, right? Because it's easy to surround yourself with people who are excellent at what they do, and you may think that's what you want to do. But then as you start to get into it, you recognize, hey, you know what, that doesn't align with who I'm trying to be or where I'm trying to get to. And it's important to recognize that you can have different groups of mentors.
Oh yeah.
You can step away from people that aren't serving you any longer. There's a famous quote that, some people are meant for a season, some people are meant for a reason, some people are meant for a lifetime,
That's right.
right? And those that are meant for a lifetime, you'll know who they are,
Yeah.
and the importance is to recognize after that those who are meant for reasons and those who are meant for seasons.
Yeah. 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 Same
Sorry, man.
analogy with the leaves, tree, and root.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Who are your root people? Who are your tree
that's
people?
right.
Who's your
That's
leaf
right.
people?
Yeah. Hmm. That's good stuff right there.
Yeah. All right. I think we're good with celebrating the small wins. Let's get into this fascinating topic of embracing failure as learning opportunities. And I can tell you, and I'll go last in this one. Um, from my first leadership position, executive leadership position in healthcare, man, whew, I had to embrace that a lot. Who wants to go first here?
But I think the biggest thing to realize when you're looking at a mindset like this is to understand that it's okay to be upset by the failure because Tanner, you're up.
Oh, that was good. That was good.
That was
Um,
awesome.
yeah,
Segue.
that's that's a small win right there.
Yeah.
We're gonna reframe that. So I think the very first question that I would ask is how do you handle failure in your personal life? Because that's going to determine how you handle failures in other places. And if you're somebody that when you look at a failure in your life, do you avoid it? Do you brush it under the rug? Do you address it head on? Do you take time to process it? Do you learn from it? Or do you make the same mistake over and over and over again because you just struggle to learn that lesson? Um, I think those are all important pieces to it. Coming from a culinary background, again, oftentimes a small failure can cause a big problem, right? So somebody screws up the temperature on a steak and overcooks it. If that's on a ticket with 15 other orders, well, all of those other orders have to be remade too. But in good kitchens, that's what happens. And in other kitchens, they may tuck it in the hot box or, remicrowave it after they're done. But in a real professional kitchen, one small mistake can have a detrimental impact on service. It messes up timing, it messes up everything. So it's real easy in that moment to fly off the handle. It's real easy in that moment to say, hey, you know what, you've been doing this long enough. You should know how to cook a steak perfect, right? Like you just said, Tad, it's easier to tear someone down than it is to lift them up. The best kitchens that I see operating right now recognize that mistakes are going to happen. And when they do, we learn from them, we grow from them, and we move on to the next task. We don't sit there and hound someone out. Remember what Johnny did last week? How he screwed up that steak? Gosh, remember that time 6 months ago when Johnny messed up that steak? No, nobody needs that. Nobody needs that in their life, right? We're all going to make mistakes. I make mistakes more than anybody else I know, right? And if I sat there in regret, I'm not going to get any further than that. Regret is a low level energy. It's a low level vibration. Reflection and learning from it, that's a high level vibration. That's a different mindset. So it's important to look at those failures, address them immediately, look at how they could have been handled different. What did we learn from it? And how do we move forward? How do we get back on track? Sometimes those failures become a glaring realization that you're on the wrong path.
Very true.
So failures can be incredibly great blessings, but you also have to have the trust in your team, and your team has to have the trust in you to come to you with the failures, to know that you're not going to aside from it being truly egregious or intentional, that you're not going to be overly punitive because of whatever reason, because you don't like the person, or because they've messed up your timeline, or let's talk about some of the real effects of failures. Does it affect your bonus? I mean, I was just working for a boss that looked me dead in my eyes and said, because of the mistake I made, the other people in that room, the other leadership team who was responsible for their own departments, because of my mistake, they weren't getting their bonuses this year. And how did I feel about that? Well, I felt pretty terrible about that. But you know what? My mistake wasn't a big enough mistake to affect all of those people, right? It was a mistake, and I made it, and I learned it, and I'll correct it, and I'll own it, right? So the way you handle your team bringing you the failure is incredibly important too, because the more you drive them down and beat them down, the more they're going to hide that stuff, and the bigger those problems become. Think about, we all have kids, right? Think about it with your kids. How many times you've had the conversation with them about honesty? Just come to me and tell me what happens. I promise you, tell me what happens. Your punishment is going to be way less severe than if I find out, or it becomes bigger, or you lied to me, or something else, right? It's that same kind of relationship. I have to trust you, and you have to trust me. And in that, we can work through almost any failure, as long as you're not doing it to screw everyone over.
So early on, when I first started working, 16 years old, I mean, I've been working since I was 13, but working at a job at 16 years old was a grocery store in the town I grew up in. And the store manager, really, really knowledgeable, but first generation German immigrant with a temper that it would match. And any little mistake you made was just, so we stopped calling him by his name. We just started calling him Little Hitler. And that I learned from that I'm not going to be that guy. And then fast forward several years into my career, probably one of the first big project management jobs I had on a construction site. And I was tasked with ordering a bunch of fixtures and equipment. And on my takeoff, I got the size wrong for some appliances I was ordering. And I ended up getting 200 refrigerators that were the wrong size. And I had to go to my boss. I said, listen, I screwed up. I missed this. I know exactly how I missed this. It's not a mistake I'm going to make again. If I need to come out of pocket to help make this right, I will. And she's like, nope, we're going to take it. Just send it back. We'll eat the fee for the misorder, get the right thing ordered, make sure it's right this time. And I drug that around with me for the rest of that project. And at the very end of the project, as we were closing out, the construction superintendent brought that up. He goes, so where did we land on this thing? Are we going to take a hit, or are you guys going to take a hit? How's that going to work out? And his boss, who he and I had clashed a little bit, he goes, well, if that happens here, that person typically gets fired. And my boss looked him straight in the eye, and she goes, why would I fire him? I just paid for his education. Why am I going to give that away to a competitor? And it just blew my mind that there was not only a sense of grace, but such an amazing silver lining that I had not considered before. and a lesson that I've taken with me, carried with me all my life. And it's an amazing thing to be able to see a failure in such a way. And yeah, it deal with it, recognize it, admit it, be honest about it, and then grow from it, because there's always a lesson to learn.
Yeah. No, I love that. What a great education.
Oh yeah.
What a way to reframe that, right? What a way to look at that from how does it benefit all of us that this mistake happened? I tell people often that, while I may have never gotten a bachelor's degree in a college, and I never went to culinary school, I'm self-taught. I own my own restaurant for a couple of years, and it's the greatest education I've ever had in my life,
Right.
right? It's the hardest I've ever worked for the least amount of money in my life.
And the
And
most
it taught
expensive
me,
education.
yeah, it taught me so much that I wouldn't have learned in any school.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of the things that when you come out of college, it's thinking that I got a bachelor's and master's in this, now I know everything. No, you don't. You have some theories and some knowledge that hasn't been put into practice yet. Now you're going to put it into practice and figure out whether is actually works or not, and how you implement it and how you practice it. It's very different than the other 30 or 40 people in your class.
Yep.
So it's really up to you to take that knowledge that you have and put it into practice and see if it works or it doesn't. I can tell you failures and for me have been just a godsend grace of I've learned to embrace them. I didn't at first. I was and um, for me, I pride myself in trying to do everything perfect and everything right. Um, a- and when failure happens earlier in my career, very early in my career, I took it very personal. It devastated me, especially in my first leadership position. Man, I thought I knew everything. I was ready to gung ho, and I was going to take over the world. And first week into it, I was like, wow, I'm a complete failure. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I was savvy enough to understand that, okay, while you're in a bad situation, you put yourself in a bad situation. How do you get out of it? How do you go to the next step? Is taking all those failures and, okay, what do I need to learn from it, and what are the resources I need to get better, and really writing it down as a lessons learned. I think Tanner talked about that when he was speaking. Um, how do you take those failures? Really, you have to have a moment of reflection if you truly want to learn from it, and so that it gets engraved in your subconscious of what am I learning from this, so that in the future I don't do the same mistakes. So for me, failures have been that, and I think both of you, and as you guys were speaking, really spoke to creating a culture of, number one, that we're acknowledging upfront that we're going to make mistakes, which we are. Everyone is. It doesn't matter anywhere. There's no such thing as a perfect functioning organization, company. That doesn't exist. That's not real. So first thing is acknowledging it, right? Second, creating that environment where it's okay to speak about it. So we acknowledge it. Now let's speak about it. Let's reflect by doing lessons learned, documenting of, hey, this happened, lessons learned. And I love what Tanner said. How do we move on from it and not having to bring it back every 5 seconds? Well, Johnny did this and Joe did that and whoever, Janet did that. No, like how do we move on? Like, okay, we did our lessons learned. We did a recap. Now let's move on and let's make sure we don't put ourselves in that situation again.
While I don't necessarily agree with the method they use, medical schools do have it down. So if they have and not an intern, but whatever doctors do when before they actually become fully certified in the hospital. They, if they make a mistake, they have a review board and they stand before all of the different doctors, and it's a, this is what happened, this is what I did, and it's just rapid fire. Why? What would you do different? What would you do different? And at the very end, what happens is they've all experienced a mistake that perhaps no one else in the room has made, but they've all learned from it.
Mhm.
And while it's a difficult position to be in, the person up at the podium having all those questions pointed at you because of your failure, it is an amazing opportunity to be able to, as I tell my son, I peed on the electric fence. You don't have to do that. I can tell you it hurts. And so if you don't have to pee on that electric fence, then don't. Learn from my mistakes, or I can learn from somebody else's mistakes. So have you ever, you mentioned something a second ago about, and Tanner mentioned it as well, learning from your own mistakes so that you don't repeat them. Have you ever gone through a time, a season, or maybe a mistake that you've made one, two, three times? You're like, damn it, I know I shouldn't have done that, and come up with that later.
Um, I can't think of a time, but I know I'm like I know that I've done things and not because of not having complete control. I knew that that was a mistake and it was going to lead to something bad, or a negative result. And I shouldn't say bad, negative result. I knew it, but I had no, I didn't have complete control to stop it. So I've had that experience. But to your question, I can't remember of one. I try to, yeah, I take mistakes very personal, and really, having because I take it very personal and I take down the steps and I write it down. I have the foresight of, hey, that's going to be a problem. Let me avoid that. Let's try something else.
Tanner, you look like you had something you were going to say.
Yeah, Tanner looks like he's about to talk.
Yeah. So I have two. Um, Both have been very, very personal lessons for me. The first one is I struggled with alcohol for a long, long time. And I quit drinking alcohol. I got, periods of clean time underneath me, and I didn't realize one, how much I was just using it to mask deeper personality things that I needed to heal. But that's a lesson that it took me 5 or 6 times to really learn. And by the last couple of lessons, I mean I really got my ass kicked and still didn't learn the lesson. And and so, that leads me to a deeper thing. We were talking about historical reflection earlier, and I've been on a very personal journey, as I mentioned, for a long time, and when I would go inward and I would spelunk down into the caverns of myself, into the darkest parts. I'd find some terrible monsters, right? But I would sit with them and I would shine light on them and I would love them because they're a part of me and they're part of what shaped me. And what I've found over the course of years of this is now when I go in, it's no longer this deep blue hole. It's this shallow reflecting pool, right? I can
Okay.
reflect instead of regret. And it's been foundational for me. The other piece is I've twice in my life taken a position based on financials, based on money, and going into both of those positions, I knew it was the wrong choice. And I let the allure of the financial freedom, which didn't really create any freedom for me, and the title, um, over overcome what I knew in my heart was the wrong decision. And so I've learned that lesson twice, and I won't. I've learned it.
I did
I've
it.
learned it.
I did it once. Same thing. Took a
Yeah,
job. I knew going into it that
I knew.
it was just just a matter of time. And
You and I
um,
may be thinking about the same job.
No, no. That's a
I'm just
whole different
joking.
ball of wax,
I'm
man.
just joking. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
That's a
Oh,
whole different celebration of failure.
oh boy. Oh boy.
So,
How many celebrations?
yeah,
Okay.
What about
But
you,
lessons
Tanner?
learned. Lessons learned,
Yeah,
you
man.
know?
That's
unfortunately, I was much older before I really found the tools to learn from my mistakes, and I was in that low level vibration, which is actually a very slippery slope. And it was going through an exercise with some really close friends, and I was apparently being very negative in this, and this really dear friend of mine, he just looked at me and he said, "Dude, what is your effing problem? You need to get out of your own head and stop doing this." And it was just kind of that in my face wake up call. And I said, "Well, I don't know how." And he goes, "We can show you." And say what you will about journaling. Journaling is it's an amazing way to get out of your own head, to get things down on paper, and then reflect back on those. Okay, that was a mistake I made. This was the consequence that happened from it, and this is what I learned from it. And then when you have that quiet time of meditation, you can reflect on, okay, yep, I did that. I'm thankful for the experience. Not super excited that it happened that way, but man, I'm not going to do that one again.
well, I mean, what you said
Yeah.
is very powerful. Of reflection, journaling is one of the most powerful things humans can do. Um, to if you do it daily, it's the best thing,
Yeah.
because it gives you time for you to really work on those things, and really take your mindset to the next level where you have things top of mind, and be like, I'm not doing that again. Boy, that today was rough for
Well,
me.
and for me, it was a process as well because I did it faithfully for several weeks, and I was like, man, this just doesn't seem to be working. He goes, well, you want to share your journal with me? And I'm like, sure, why not? So I open it up, and he goes, this isn't a journal. He goes, this is a bitch fest. All you're doing is griping in here. You're not doing. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? He goes, no,
That's
you
what
talk
I,
about the issue,
yeah.
about how it made you feel, and then what you learned from that. You don't
Mhm.
just gripe about it on paper because
No.
that's not going to do you any good. And it was that little bit of course correction that he gave me that has made a tremendous difference in my own life. And it is something that, sorry, my dogs are running up and down the stairs. It is something that has been tremendously powerful and useful. And I've hopefully passed on to both my kids and a lot of team members as well.
I mean, it's
Oh,
important
that's awesome.
what you say and what you learn from that guy. I'm sorry, Tanner. I'll give it back to you
You're
later.
good. You're good.
Is the lessons learned piece. So it's not just garbage in, right? It's just not just, you just blah 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 diarrhea of the mouth, and then that's it. So we know, okay, you got it out, great. Okay, what are you supposed to learn from it?
Right.
That's where it matters. Okay, that's where your subconscious then kicks in. You're like, oh, okay, yes, this is a bad situation, but this is what I learned from it. Store it in your subconscious, so next time it comes up, you can use it as a lessons learned. Hey, I've
Right.
been here, done that. This is what's supposed to happen. Tanner, to you.
Yeah, so I had a great friend of mine years ago, one of those that was for a season. His name's Daniel Culp, and he told me during that time about journaling. He said, "There's something that happens between the heart and the pen that doesn't happen between the mind and the mouth." And it's always stuck with me. Sometimes when I'm working through big problems, I have a very analytical mind, but it's also very creative, and it can be very loud, and it can be like just electricity firing through there all the time. And so sometimes, I just need dictation, right? I need to throw on my headphones, and I just need to get it out. But oftentimes I have to go back to that thought and really journal it out in order for me to really get to the nuances of what was deeper inside. There's something that happens between the heart and the pen that just doesn't happen between the mind and the mouth. The other thing, as we've been talking about reflection, or I've been talking quite a bit about reflection. How often have you gone back and read some of your old journals?
Probably not frequently enough.
So just recently, I mean, I just went through a big move, and before I did, I found this old journal of mine, and a lot of it in it was not stuff that is relevant today, but there was also a big piece of my growth journey from about 5 years ago in there, and being able to look at where I was 5 years ago to
Mm.
where I am now was very enlightening, because it shows that the intentions that I've set years and years ago I'm still working towards, and some of them I've completed, some of them I'm still working towards. So it's a good way to also go back and just check, am I still where I hoped to be? Have I evolved into something better than what I had hoped to be? Can I look at that and say, wow, my thoughts maybe weren't as clear or concise or as introspective as I need them now. So I'd recommend it. I'd say go take one from, and I don't know how long you've been journaling, Tad, but if you have one 5 years ago, open it up to a random page and just see where your mind was at then to where it's at now.
So one of the things that I did was on that first journal book that was just nothing but a gripe fest. I continued to fill it out. I'd get the negative stuff there, and then I'd close it, and then I'd do real journaling in another one. Sometime later, I decided, you know what? I need to get these things out of my head. So I went out, I've got an outside fireplace, lit a fire, and I went through that journal page by page. I'm letting that go, rip into the fire.
I do
Oh,
that.
And
beautiful.
the therapeutic relief was way more than I could have imagined, but it was just a way to physically manifest that release. And it's no longer readable. It's no longer graspable because it has now changed state. And so every now and again, I'll grab that journal and I'll go out there and yep, that's still something I'm dealing with, and I'll throw it in the fire. But
That's
yeah,
that's a tradition that dates back to like native cultures, like Native American cultures, indigenous cultures.
Mhm.
When they were struggling with stuff, they would put it to paper, they'd put it to wood, and they'd burn it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I do that with very similar to what you're saying, Tad, I write a lot of things. So when from time to time it's like, okay, I don't need this, so burn it off, shred it into a million pieces, and then goes away. And this is magic. I mean, you just kind of have this like aura of negative energy that just falls off, and
yeah.
yep. All right, so let's start wrapping it up because we're is a little bit over an hour. Final thoughts from both of you.
Tanner?
Well, I was going to let you go first since you're the guest, but I'll
Okay.
jump. I'll jump in. I'll jump in. So, Tad, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you. It's great to hear you. You truly are a brother of mine, and I love this topic. So, thank you for this topic. It's so important to celebrate wins. It's so important to recognize the lessons in failures. And just know that as a leader, you're in charge of people. Your role is to lead people. The mission is the organization's mission, right? And you need to honor that in your leadership, but it's about people. That's what we work with. So thank you so much for being here. If you are interested in anything regarding authenticity and purpose, please reach out to tannerthorp.com. We can definitely put together some journal prompts for those of you that are curious about that, and I'd love to connect with you there.
Well, awesome. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast. I love catching up with you guys. And I won't speak for anybody else on this podcast, but I've had some challenges in the past few months, and they seemed like failures, but in retrospect, they have been absolute godsends. And the things that I'm learning from it and how I'm growing from it are absolutely amazing. So
Yeah.
if you go back to book of the Bible, I never can't remember his name, but Joseph, his
Joe.
brother sold
Oh,
him into
Joseph.
slavery. He goes, what
Yeah.
others intended for evil, God intended for good. And I have chosen to reframe that in my mind, that what somebody else may have wanted to do in a negative way, God has got a plan for me. And I'm going to celebrate that failure because it's going to lead me to a win. So thank you guys so
Absolutely.
much.
Awesome, awesome.
Love that.
It won't be the last time, so we'll have you on again. I'm gonna leave our audience with a couple of examples, tips for small wins. Let's make sure that we do thank you notes. A simple thank you note
Right.
goes a long way. Okay, in the meeting, publicly celebrating someone for something they did or a milestone, it's not going to hurt anyone. It doesn't cost anything, and you can have everything to gain. As far as seeing failures as opportunities, what we talked about the second half was about lessons learned. Make sure you're taking the time to really understand, your lessons learned, document them, and then make sure you move on from it and create that culture of we accept that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to do a retrospection, a reflection moment, look at what happened, and then we're going to move on. Thank you. It's been great, great conversation. Listen for our next episode. Have a good one, everyone.
So
Thank y'all.
long.
Go forth and do great things.